You know that feeling when you're stuck in traffic? Every single driver's decision to be on that road has a tiny but very real cost for you. It's like a hidden economic ripple. Or, hey, think about a neighbor who plants this amazing garden. You get to enjoy it for free, right? Well, these are the invisible costs and benefits that spill over onto other people, and today we're going to dive deep into the economic idea that explains it all: externalities. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to nail down what an externality actually is. Then we'll look at two totally different ways to handle the problems they cause. One that says government should step in, and another that trusts people to work it out on their own. We'll see these two ideas go head-to-head in the perfect arena, the traffic jam. And we'll finish up with a really important warning. Sometimes the cure can be way worse than the disease. All right, first up, what in the world is an externality? You know, this subtitle here, "One man gathers what another man spills," just nails it. It's the perfect image. Think of it like this. An action happens over here, but the effects, good or bad, just kind of spill out and splash onto people who were just minding their own business. So at its heart, an externality is really just an economic side effect. It's when a cost or a benefit from some activity spills over onto somebody else. And the key, the absolutely crucial part, is that this third party had zero say in what happened, yet they're stuck dealing with the costs or enjoying the free benefits. And this slide breaks down the two flavors perfectly. Over on the left, you've got your negative externality. So picture a factory cranking out, I don't know, Foozle dolls, and in the process, it dumps this nasty, smelly gunk into a river. Well, the folks downstream, they didn't buy any dolls, but now they're stuck with this awful smell. They're paying a price for a deal they weren't a part of. Then on the right, you've got the positive flip side. You decide to paint your house. You get to enjoy it, of course. But guess what? Your neighbors also get a nicer view. Maybe their property values even tick up a bit, and they didn't have to do a thing. That's a benefit spilling over for free. Okay, so if we have these spillovers, how do we deal with them? Well, that brings us to our second section, the Pigouvian approach. This is named after an economist, A.C. Pigou, and it's pretty much the solution you'll find in any Econ 101 textbook. The idea is that these spillovers are basically market failures, and it's the government's job to step in and fix them. Pigou's idea is actually pretty straightforward. His logic is this: left on its own, the market will always make too much of the bad stuff, like pollution, because the factory isn't being forced to pay for the stinky river. And at the same time, it'll produce too little of the good stuff, like groundbreaking research, because the creator can't cash in on all the benefits it provides to society. So what's the solution? Use the government to rebalance the scales. You tax the bad stuff to make it more expensive, and you subsidize the good stuff to encourage more of it. Simple, right? But is that really the only way? And this leads us to a really powerful counterargument to Pigou's whole idea, the property rights response. This alternative way of thinking asks a totally different question. Hey, maybe people can actually solve these problems themselves, without a big central plan from the government. Now, this big counterargument didn't just pop up out of nowhere. You can see on this timeline how the critique kind of evolved over decades. You had thinkers like Robbins and Rothbard who started chipping away at the assumptions behind Pigou's neat little solution, but the whole game changed in 1960 thanks to a guy named Ronald Coase, who basically flipped the whole problem on its head. And this right here is Coase's massive insight. He basically said, look, the real problem isn't the pollution itself. The problem is that nobody clearly owns the river. If you can clearly define who has the rights, whether it's the factory or the people downstream, and if it's easy for them to talk to each other, they can just work it out. The factory could pay the residents for the right to pollute, or maybe the residents pay the factory to stop. Either way, that spillover cost is no longer some vague external thing. It gets internalized. It becomes part of a deal. And this isn't just some abstract theory. I mean, check this out. Beekeepers and fruit growers. For years, economists pointed to this as a textbook case of market failure. The growers' trees provide nectar for the bees pollinate the fruit, it's a win-win, positive externalities all around. But then an economist named Stephen Chung actually went and looked. And what did he find? They'd already solved it. They created their own little market for pollination services with contracts and everything. The solution was literally in the yellow pages. And the solutions aren't always about money and contracts either. Think about plain old social pressure, right? If your house has peeling paint, your neighbors might start giving you the side eye. Maybe you don't get invited to the next block party. That's another way we handle externalities. But the key here is how flexible it is. If you truly deeply love your weird mauve-colored house, you can just ignore the haters. But a government regulation on house colors? Nope, that's not flexible at all. You're just stuck. Okay, So let's take these two big competing ideas out for a spin in the real world. And what better place to do that than with a problem we all know and hate, the traffic jam? So which way of thinking gets it right? Is traffic an externality problem that the government needs to fix? Or is it really a property rights problem at its core? Economist Paul Krugman pretty much sums up the classic Pigouvian view here. When you decide to jump in your car during rush hour, you're thinking about your costs, your gas, your time. What you're not thinking about is the extra few seconds of delay you're adding for every single other driver on that road. That's the negative externality in a nutshell. And we're not talking about small change here. A study back in 1999 looked at Atlanta's morning commute and figured that each extra driver on the road cost everybody else about $14 in lost time. Now multiply that by thousands of cars every single day, you're talking about billions of dollars in these hidden costs. So this brings us to the absolute key question from the property rights side of things. Why is the road different? Why in this one specific area of life are drivers not forced to actually deal with the costs they're pushing onto other people? And this comparison really drives the point home. I mean, think about it. You never go to the supermarket and find a 2-hour line to check out. You don't show up to your seat at the opera and find 3 other people already sitting there. Why not? Because the private owners have a huge financial incentive to manage the space and make sure you have a good experience. Public roads, which you pay for through taxes no matter what, they just don't have that direct feedback loop. And the result is what we all experience: constant overcrowding. Here's another fantastic example from Thomas Sowell: mud flaps. It seems like a classic problem, right? You only really benefit from the mud flaps on the car in front of you, so why would you buy them for your own car? It looks like you'd need a law to make it happen. But again, think about it. This problem only even exists because the roads are public. A private road owner who wanted to offer a cleaner, safer drive could just say, hey, want to use my road? You need mud flaps. Problem solved. Okay, this brings us to our final section, and it's a really critical takeaway. Let's call it the cycle of consequences. This is the idea that sometimes the solution you come up with for an externality ends up creating a whole new mess of problems. You get trapped in this loop of good intentions just making things worse. And the story of the SUV is the perfect example of this cycle in action. Step 1. The government says cars need to have higher fuel efficiency. Step 2. Whoops, there's a loophole. SUVs get classified as trucks, so they have lower standards. Step 3. The predictable result. Car companies and buyers all pivot away from station wagons and flock to the less efficient SUVs, which kind of defeats the whole purpose. And step 4, the totally predictable next move, calls for a new regulation to deal with the SUV problem, a problem the first regulation helped create. And this really gets to the heart of the matter. A lot of times when people argue for a new regulation, they'll say it's just a smart business decision that companies should be doing anyway. But that raises a pretty big question. If it's such a smart decision, why does it need to be a law? This quote says it all. That logic only works if you happen to think politicians are also the best entrepreneurs we've got. Now let's be super clear here. Nobody is saying the free market is perfect. Not even close. Private companies are, to use the source's words, fully capable of awful screw-ups. So the choice isn't between a perfect system and a flawed one. The real question is, which system's mistakes are less damaging and easier to fix? And that, right there, is the question to leave you with. We don't get to choose between a flawless government plan and a messy market. We get a choice between two imperfect systems, and both are going to have their own types of screw-ups. So the question we have to ask ourselves is this: which kind of error do we prefer? The scattered, often self-correcting mistakes of the market, or the centralized and often self-repeating mistakes of government intervention?